If you ever travel through the low country of South Carolina, there is one story locals refuse to talk about. They look away. They change the subject. Some even cross themselves. And every time someone tries to bring it up, they whisper the same warning. Do not ask about Belmere Plantation. Do not ask about the well. And whatever you do, never let your shadow touch it. Now settle in. Keep the lights on. This is the beginning of a 10-part story that once terrified an entire region and nearly disappeared from American history forever. Part 1. The Well That Watched. There was a rule on certain South Carolina plantations that made no sense to outsiders. It was not a rule about work hours. It was not about punishment. It was not about where people could step or who they could speak to. No, this rule was so oddly specific that it sounded almost childish. Yet it was enforced with such brutality that no one at Belmere Plantation ever dared break it. For 73 years the people living there obeyed that rule. They obeyed it even after the plantation owners had fled during the Civil War. And when Union soldiers arrived in 1865 and asked why the rule still mattered, the answer they heard made several officers step back in horror. Some became physically sick. What they found afterward led to one of the most suppressed military reports of the Reconstruction era. A report that stayed hidden until 1982. But before we get that far, before the truth rises from the bottom of that well, we need to start where it all began. And the rule was simple. Never let your shadow touch the well. Belmere Plantation covered 1,100 acres of heavy, fertile bottomland in the low country. It sat about 40 miles inland from Charleston, close enough to feel the ocean's breath but far enough to be isolated by swamps and rivers. The land had belonged to the Grantham family since 1748. It passed from father to son for 3 generations, each one expanding the rice fields a little more. By 1792, when our story begins, Belmere was one of the most profitable rice operations in the region. Nearly 200 enslaved men, women, and children worked the flooded fields that stretched toward the Combahee River. The plantation house stood tall and proud. 3 stories of brick and cypress wood, built to impress visitors and intimidate everyone else. A wide piazza wrapped around the south side, catching whatever slight breeze could cut through the thick humidity. Nearby stood the kitchen house. Then the counting house, the overseer's cottage, the stables, and beyond all that, the long row of cabins where the enslaved people lived in small, stuffy rooms barely strong enough to keep out the rain. Yet none of these structures commanded the same attention as the well. The well dominated everything. It stood in the exact center of the work yard, set 147 feet from the main house. Not 1 foot more, not 1 foot less. Its location was measured with strange precision, far more careful than anyone expected for a basic water source. It was deep too, deeper than any well most of the people had ever heard of. More than 200 feet, according to the men who dug it. Men who still winced when they talked about that job. The opening was wide, 8 feet across, surrounded by a heavy stone rim that rose 3 feet above the ground. Above it hung an iron frame with a pulley for the bucket. Around the entire thing ran a perfect circle of white stones. Each stone was painted. Each stone rested exactly 10 feet from the edge of the well. No one crossed that line. No one even allowed their shadow to stretch across it. That ring was the boundary. That ring was the warning. And everyone at Belmere understood that rule, even if they did not understand the reason. Thomas Grantham, the plantation master in 1792, had insisted on the rule decades earlier. He was not known for unusual kindness. But he was also not considered unusually cruel for the time. Which is to say that compared to the world he lived in, his brutality blended into the background. His violence looked like discipline. His silence looked like strength. Grantham had lost his wife to yellow fever. His 3 children had died young as well. He ran Belmere with cold, methodical order. He wrote down every bushel harvested, every coin spent, and every birth and death among the enslaved. His overseer, Declan Pruitt, came from a different mold entirely. Younger, harder, a man who believed fear was more efficient than food. His pale blue eyes tracked everything for miles, missing nothing. His reputation was known across counties. People whispered that he enjoyed the sound of breaking spirits. Among the enslaved were several people whose lives and memories would become essential to understanding what happened at Belmere. Rachel worked in the main house and remembered everything she heard. Her husband, Isaac, was a blacksmith. Their daughter, Judith, was only 7. Old enough to fear the well, but too young to understand its secrets. There was Marcus, 53 years old, who had been at Belmere longer than anyone else. He had helped dig the well. He knew things others did not. And there was Dinah, young, 19, newly arrived. She had been at Belmere only 6 weeks. She had not yet learned all the rules. She did not know how dangerous a single question could be. The white stones around the well were repainted every spring. The people who did this work moved on their hands and knees, so their shadows would not stretch where they should not. Everyone obeyed. Everyone feared. But almost no one understood why. Until the afternoon Dinah made a mistake. It was August 14, 1792. The heat that day was so heavy it felt alive. Thunderheads gathered in the distance but refused to offer rain. Dinah had been carrying water from the well to the kitchen. It was her 4th trip. The sun was lowering in the west, and shadows had begun to stretch longer across the yard. Rachel was at the kitchen window when she saw Dinah walk toward the well. Dinah stopped at the white stone circle. She waited, but the sun's angle was wrong. Her shadow stretched across the stones and reached the stone rim of the well itself. For a single second nothing happened. Then Thomas Grantham stepped out of the counting house. Rachel froze. Pruitt appeared from the stable. The two men moved toward Dinah with slow, terrible purpose. Dinah backed away, confused, frightened, her empty bucket forgotten. What followed was a punishment so brutal that the sound of it carried across the rice fields. Birds fell silent. Workers stopped in place. And when it was finally over, Dinah's back was ruined. Beyond ruin, really. Destroyed in a way that made no sense for such a small mistake. That night, as Rachel tended to her, Dinah whispered a question. "Why? My shadow barely touched it. Why?" Rachel did not answer. Later, in their cabin, Rachel told Isaac what she had seen. Isaac waited a long time before speaking. "Marcus told me something about that well," he said softly. "Something from when they dug it. He said they dug deeper than any well should go. 200 feet before water. And then Grantham made them go 20 feet more." Rachel frowned. "Why?" Isaac shook his head. "Marcus said the water down there tasted strange. Metallic. Cold enough to hurt your teeth. And he said that when they were at the very bottom, they heard voices. Not English. Not any language he knew." Rachel stared at him, waiting. Isaac lowered his voice to a whisper. "And Marcus said those voices were not coming from the men above. They were coming from below. If you want, I can continue with part 2, 1,000 words, in the same style. Part 2, the water that was not water. Hook. People say nightmares end when you wake up. At Belmere, the nightmare began the moment people opened their eyes. Because by 1821, something in the well had started to wake up too. Part 2, the first sign that something had changed at Belmere Plantation was almost too small to notice. A strange smell drifting from the old well. It was faint at first, a whisper of metal in the air, the kind of scent you might miss if you were not standing close. But the people who lived their entire lives around that well felt it immediately. They knew the smell of water. They knew when something was wrong. Rachel was working in the main house when Abel came in from the yard, carrying a bucket in one hand and a worried expression on his face. He set the pail down on the wooden floor and waited for her to come closer. She leaned over the bucket, expecting the familiar cold metallic scent the well had always carried. Instead she felt her stomach twist. This was different, stronger, sharper, like old iron that had been sealed away for a long time and had finally been opened. She said nothing. Talking about the well rarely made things better. But that afternoon, while she cleaned the master bedroom, she found herself staring out the window toward the work yard, toward the wooden lid Robert Grantham had recently ordered placed over the well. It was supposed to keep the smell in, but she could still sense it from the house. She wondered if anyone else felt the same unease crawling up the back of her neck. The answer came the next day. A group of women drawing water for washing stood whispering near the cabins. One pointed at the old well. One pinched her nose. A third swore she had seen a faint red tint when she pulled water from it earlier. By the end of the week, the entire enslaved community knew that the water had changed. And they were afraid, not just because of what they saw, but because of what they remembered. Rachel remembered Thomas Grantham's dying words. The well is a seal. Shadow is the key. What comes up will not be water. She wanted to believe his fever had made him mad. But the smell in the air told her otherwise. The first sickness began in the second week of June. A young boy named Caleb complained of a pounding ache behind his eyes. He rubbed his face constantly, like something inside his skull was trying to push outward. That evening he collapsed in his cabin, trembling and burning with fever. 2 days later Isaac felt the same pain. Then Dinah. Then a dozen others. The pattern was clear. Anyone who had gone near the old well was falling ill. At first the symptoms seemed simple enough. Headaches, fatigue, a strange pressure behind the eyes. But then the dreams began. Rachel was the first to speak of them. She told Isaac one morning that she had dreamed she was standing at the bottom of the well. Water rose around her ankles, then her knees, then her chest. She should have been drowning, but she could breathe. Something moved deep below her feet. Something alive. It whispered. It spoke words she did not know. Words that felt older than the world. Isaac listened silently. Then he admitted he had dreamed the same dream. Only he had gone deeper. He felt hands brushing his skin. Voices filled his ears. Voices begging him to listen. By July, nearly everyone who had been near the well was dreaming of the same place. The same darkness. The same ancient voices rising through the cold water. Robert Grantham tried to ignore the growing fear. He believed sickness always found the weak first. He told the doctor from Charleston that the people at Belmere were overreacting. He insisted that a little mineral in the water was nothing to worry about. He ordered the well inspected again. That is when he brought in the mason. The man's name was Yates. He was a quiet worker who had repaired dozens of wells along the coast. He had no patience for superstition. No fear of deep holes or old stories. When he arrived at Belmere he walked to the well with calm confidence. He studied the stone rim. He tapped the wood cover with the back of his knuckles. When he lifted the lid he frowned. The smell hit him immediately. Thick, metallic, heavy enough to make the eyes water. He tied a lantern to his belt. He secured the rope around his waist. And without hesitation he descended into the dark. Robert Grantham stood at the edge of the well, his hands behind his back, trying to appear calm. Rachel watched from the kitchen steps. Isaac lingered nearby with the others. No one spoke. They listened to the sound of the rope sliding across the pulley. They listened to the lantern clinking softly as Yates dropped lower and lower into the shaft. 20 feet down, 30, 50, then the rope jerked. Hard. Yates screamed, pull me up now. His voice cracked with terror. The workers hauling the rope nearly dropped it in shock. They pulled as fast as they could. The rope swung wildly. When Yates emerged from the well he scrambled away from the opening like something was chasing him. He fell to the ground, shaking violently. His face looked drained of all color. His eyes darted in every direction. What did you see? Grantham demanded. Yates tried to speak. At first no words came out. Then he whispered one sentence that chilled everyone who heard it. That is not water. Rachel felt the world around her tilt. Isaac took a step back. Even Pruitt, who feared nothing, looked uneasy. Grantham knelt beside Yates. What do you mean it is not water? Yates swallowed hard. The lantern was still in his hand. He held it up. The flame flickered inside, shaking as badly as he was. The level is rising, he said. Too fast. Not like water. Something down there is pushing it up. And the color. God help us. The color is wrong. Grantham narrowed his eyes. You are a mason. Speak like one. What did you see? Yates closed his eyes. When he opened them again, tears ran down his face. It looked like water at first. Then it moved like it was alive. Not like a wave. Like something breathing. And something touched the bottom of my boot. Something warm. Something soft. Rachel gripped the edge of the kitchen door. She felt a cold shiver run through her arms and legs. Fill it in, Yates said suddenly. His voice cracked with desperation. Fill that well in. Fill it before it climbs out. He stood, backing away. He refused to go anywhere near the well again. He would not take his payment. He would not eat. He left Belmere that same hour and never returned. The air at Belmere felt different after that. The sky looked dimmer even on bright days. The old well felt like a living presence in the middle of the yard, breathing beneath its wooden lid. And at night, the dreams grew stronger. Something was rising. Something was waking. And the seal that had kept it contained for 73 years was gone. If you'd like, I can continue with part 3, keep the same tone, or make it scarier, darker, or more mysterious. Part 3, The Rising Below. Engaging hook. Some places do not wait for the living to call them. They reach up first. And when they do, the strongest men, the bravest workers, even the most practical minds are forced to face one truth. Some things buried in the dark should never wake. Part 3. People in Belmere Plantation had always respected the old well. Respect grew into fear, and fear eventually settled into silence. But nothing prepared them for what happened after Yates climbed out of that darkness and refused to ever return. When he said the water was no longer water, every man in that room felt something tighten in his chest. Robert Grantham was not the kind of man who jumped at shadows. He did not believe in curses or ghosts or stories whispered at night. But he understood danger. He understood problems that grew if ignored. So he ordered the well filled in. Rocks, dirt, anything that would seal whatever was down there. Load after load fell into the opening. Yet the well never filled. It swallowed everything like a hungry throat that had waited too long to be fed. Men worked from sunrise to sunset, sweat covering their backs, fear pushing them to move faster. A full week passed, and the well remained almost as deep as before. It was as if the earth itself had opened a mouth and refused to close. So Grantham changed the plan. If the well would not accept the earth, they would cover its mouth entirely. A thick wooden platform was built over the opening. Bricks and mortar sealed it until the structure looked solid, unbreakable, harmless. The smell faded. Children went back to chores and games. Mothers breathed easier. Men talked again, though always in low voices. For the first time in months, people believed the trouble was over. For a while, it was. Then came September of 1821. Little Thomas disappeared. The boy was small, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of child who listened more than he spoke. He had always been curious about the well, even after it was sealed. His parents warned him again and again. Do not go near it. Do not wander alone. Do not stare at it or think about it. But warnings only made his curiosity stronger. One Thursday afternoon, his mother sent him to carry tools to his father at the carpentry shop. Thomas never arrived. Abel searched every path between the house and the shop. Judith checked every cabin. Soon the whole plantation was calling his name. They found him at sunset. He was standing on the sealed well, his feet placed squarely in the center of the brick cap. His arms hung at his sides. His face was expressionless. The sinking orange sun behind him made him look almost like a statue carved out of shadow. Isaac reached him first. He climbed onto the platform and touched his grandson's shoulder. Thomas, can you hear me? The boy slowly turned his head. His eyes looked open but empty, as if he was staring at something far away or deep inside himself. When he spoke, the sound coming from his throat was not the voice of a 12-year-old. It was deeper, older, ancient. The seal is broken, Thomas said. 3 years of shadows. 3 years of light falling where it should not. The door is open. The water rises. We rise with it. Then his knees buckled and he fell. Isaac caught him before his skull hit the bricks. They carried him away, shouting for help as they ran. Inside Rachel's cabin, Thomas shivered violently. His skin burned like fire. Sweat soaked his clothes. For 3 days he drifted between waking and fever. When he was awake he trembled and cried. When the fever swallowed him, the other voice returned. He spoke of 1748. He spoke of Thomas Grantham's father digging into something beneath the ground. Something that never should have been touched. He spoke of a network of ancient caves under the plantation. Not natural caves. Not carved by water. Carved by time itself before people ever walked the land. He spoke of water older than the world. Water that lived. Water that waited. Shadow makes it rise, Thomas whispered during one fevered night. His fingers clutched Rachel's hand so tightly her own skin turned white. Light keeps it down. Shadow lets it up. 3 years of shadows on the water and now the seal is cracked. It is coming up slowly but it is coming. When it reaches the air everything dies. Everyone dies. Rachel told him to hush. She told him he was sick. But deep inside, she no longer believed her own words. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Thomas woke weak but clear. He remembered little except standing on the well and hearing something call to him. "Grandma," he said quietly. "What is under the well?" Rachel had no answer. Robert Grantham decided enough was enough. If the sealed cover was cracking, they would tear the whole thing apart. Destroy the well completely. Take it apart stone by stone. Expose whatever was underneath and bury it for good. They would fill the hole with compacted earth until nothing could rise again. Work started on Monday. By Wednesday half the crew wanted to quit. The smell coming from the exposed well made their eyes water and their stomachs twist. The water level had risen far more than expected. It now stood less than 100 feet down instead of hundreds. Worse, the liquid was wrong. Thick, red-brown like old blood. It pulsed in slow shapes, as if something beneath its surface was breathing. No one spoke, but everyone felt the same thing. The well did not hold water. It held something alive. On Thursday the accident happened. Benjamin was only 23 years old. Strong, well-liked. He stood near the rim, pulling loose stones away. The ground shifted. The stones gave way. He fell straight down. His scream echoed once. Then the sound cut off when he hit the thick liquid below. 5 men ran to throw ropes in. None of them could see Benjamin. The surface had already smoothed over where he had fallen. It looked calm, too calm, as if it had swallowed him whole and closed its mouth again. One of the men shouted Benjamin's name. Something moved in the red-brown water. A slow ripple, a shape, a hint of something rising just beneath the surface. The men froze. Something was not just waking. Something was climbing. Part 4, the thing beneath. Engaging hook. Some dangers crawl upward so slowly that people convince themselves they are safe. But when something ancient finally reaches for the living world, it does not knock. It does not whisper. It simply rises. And once it rises, nothing can push it back down. Part 4. Benjamin's fall changed everything. Before that morning, the workers treated the well like a problem. Hard work, long hours, bad smell, something they could manage if they stayed strong. But when Benjamin vanished beneath that thick, silent surface, the well became something else. It became a mouth that had just eaten a man. When the water smoothed over like nothing had happened, every worker stepped back at the same time. Their boots scraped across the dirt. Their eyes fixed on the dark red surface. It moved with a slow pulse, as if something far below was stretching upward, waking up, tasting what had fallen in. Robert Grantham arrived minutes later. He saw the empty rope. He saw the pale faces. He saw the way the men stood, legs stiff, backs tight, eyes wide. They did not have to explain. He understood. Even practical men know when they are looking at something that should not exist. Grantham swallowed hard. Get him out. Whatever it takes. Get him out. No one moved. The foreman finally spoke. His voice shook. "Sir, we did not see him come back up." Grantham looked into the well. The water below shifted in slow circles. It was not water at all. It looked like something alive was breathing just beneath the surface. "Bring torches," he said quietly. 4 men brought burning torches and leaned them over the well. For the first time, they saw that the thick red surface did not reflect the flames. It absorbed the light, drank it, pulled it down as if hungry for it. One of the younger workers whispered a single word. "Alive." No one corrected him. Grantham clenched his jaw. "Lower the torches down. We need to see the depth." The foreman tied a torch to a rope and slowly lowered it into the well. The flame sputtered. Smoke curled upward. The deeper it went, the dimmer it became. 50 feet. 60, 70, at 80 feet the flame suddenly winked out. The rope jerked. The foreman yanked it back up, hand over hand. When the torch returned, the wood was still warm. The flame had not died from water. It had been smothered, swallowed. Something in the well had taken the light. Some of the workers stepped back farther. One crossed himself. Another whispered a prayer. They all heard the truth in their own heartbeat. Whatever lived down there did not want to stay down anymore. By noon the men refused to continue. "We are not going near it again," the foreman said. His voice was steady but his hands shook. Not for any pay. Grantham could see the truth in their eyes. If he forced them, they would run. So he ordered the area cleared and sent everyone home for the day. But word spread fast. Families whispered inside their cabins. Mothers clutched their children. Even the animals grew restless. Horses refused to cross the yard near the well. Dogs barked toward the ground with their tails tucked low. Rachel sat beside little Thomas that night. His fever had broken days earlier, but she noticed something strange. Every time he drifted toward sleep, his eyes flicked open again like he sensed something moving in the dark. Something pulling, something calling. "Grandma," he said softly. "It is higher now." Rachel felt a cold line trace her spine. "How do you know?" Thomas pressed a hand against his throat, as if remembering that deep voice that had spoken through him. "I can hear it again. Very far away. But it is closer than before." She held him tightly until he fell asleep. Across the plantation, Isaac met with Robert Grantham on the porch of the main house. They lit lamps, though neither man felt comfort from the small flames. "We cannot leave it like this," Isaac said. "The longer that thing rises, the stronger it gets." Grantham rubbed a hand across his forehead. "Everything we tried failed. What do you think we should do?" Isaac looked toward the dark yard. Toward the half-destroyed stones around the well. Toward the air that smelled faintly of metal and rot. "In my grandfather's time," he said slowly, "people spoke of the ground beneath this land. They said there were caves under us. Caverns that stretched for miles. Old places where the earth never saw light. Places with water that did not flow like river water. Water that waited." Grantham stared at him. "Waited for what?" Isaac hesitated. His voice dropped. "For release." A gust of wind swept across the porch. The lamps flickered. Something hollow echoed across the empty yard. A soft distant sound. Not wind. Not an animal. Almost like a breath. The next morning Grantham gathered the bravest men he could find. They planned to lower a heavy stone slab into the well. Not to destroy it, but to push the rising liquid back down. To hold it. To press it into the depths. The slab was enormous. 6 men strained to lift it. They carried it to the edge. One step at a time. Muscles shaking. Faces tight with fear. "Lower it," Grantham commanded. They began to lower the stone using ropes and wood pulleys. The moment the slab passed the rim, the air changed. It grew colder. Heavier. The ropes creaked. The stone descended slowly toward the red surface below. When the slab was 20 feet down, the water moved. A ripple. A swell. A bulge rising upward as if something beneath it pushed back. 30 feet down. The slab trembled. The ropes strained. 40 feet down. The surface of the red liquid broke into small spirals that rotated against each other. Like eyes opening. 50 feet down. Grantham whispered something no one had ever heard from him before. "Please let this work." 60 feet down. The slab suddenly lurched sideways as if struck from below. One worker lost his grip. Another cried out. The ropes snapped with sharp cracks. The stone dropped fast. It hit the surface that was not water. The sound was wrong. Too soft. Too muffled. As if it had landed on something thick. Something alive. Then the slab vanished beneath the surface. Completely swallowed. The workers backed away in terror. Grantham stared in silence. The well shuddered. A long low sound came from its depths. Not a roar. Not a groan. A hum. A slow rising hum that vibrated the ground and shook the stones under their feet. The red surface swelled upward like a chest taking its first breath. And for the first time, everyone understood the truth. They had not pushed it down. They had awakened it. Whatever lived beneath Belmere Plantation was rising. And now nothing stood in its way. Part 5, The Nights of Trembling Earth. Engaging hook. Some nightmares begin in darkness, but the worst ones begin in silence. When the earth holds its breath, when the air turns heavy, when the ground itself feels alive beneath your feet, you know something old has opened its eyes. And once it wakes, there is no going back. Part 5. Belmere Plantation did not sleep the night after the stone slab vanished beneath the red liquid. No one spoke of it out loud, but the truth hung in the air like smoke. The well had taken the stone the same way it had taken Benjamin. Without splash, without struggle, without mercy. By sundown, an unnatural quiet settled over the plantation. Birds vanished from the trees. Crickets stopped singing. Even the wind refused to cross the yard near the well. It was as if the land itself was holding perfectly still, listening for something deep below. In the cabins people whispered prayers. Children cried without knowing why. Fathers stood in doorways staring toward the work yard. Mothers shut windows even though the night was painfully hot. They all sensed the same thing. Something was rising. Inside their small cabin, Rachel and Isaac argued in hushed voices. Rachel wanted to take little Thomas and flee into the woods. Isaac understood the fear but knew the truth. No one could outrun something that moved through the earth itself. If we leave, Isaac said quietly, it will follow. If it rises and reaches open ground, it will not stop. Rachel studied the boy sleeping on the mat beside them. His skin looked pale, his breathing shallow, sweat beaded across his forehead. But his eyelids fluttered as though he was dreaming of something that watched him from below. It knows him, Rachel whispered. It knows his name. How can it know a child? Isaac looked away because he had no answer. Near midnight the first tremor came. A slow roll under the earth, gentle enough that cups did not fall or walls did not crack, but strong enough that everyone in the cabins felt it in their bones. Little Thomas woke with a gasp. It is climbing, he whispered. I can hear it again. It is closer now. It is coming for air. Rachel wrapped her arms around him tightly and rocked him while Isaac stepped outside. The air was thick and hot like the breath of some giant creature. He looked toward the well, barely visible in the moonlight. The stones around it vibrated softly, almost rhythmically. The ground hummed. He returned inside and locked the door, though he knew a simple door could not stop anything that lived beneath 200 feet of earth. The second tremor came at 2 in the morning. This one was stronger. Lamps toppled inside the cabins. A pot fell in the kitchen. The overseer awoke with a shout and ran outside, thinking a tree had struck the roof. But nothing moved around him except the ground. At the main house, Robert Grantham was already awake. He had spent the night sitting in his study with 2 oil lamps lit beside him. His account books lay open but untouched. His hands were clenched, his face pale. When the tremor shook the house, he rose and looked out the window toward the well. He saw something he had not seen before. The faintest glow around the mouth of the well. A sickly red shimmer like light reflecting off a river of blood. He grabbed his coat and hurried outside. The moment he stepped onto the ground he felt the vibration through his boots. The earth trembled softly but continually, like something breathing beneath the soil. He walked toward the well with slow careful steps. When he reached the edge of the yard, Isaac's voice stopped him. Do not go closer, Isaac said from the shadows. It is awake. Grantham turned to him. What is happening? Isaac looked toward the well. His face was lined with fear and exhaustion. In the stories my grandfather told, there were tales of old waters beneath the low country. Waters that did not flow with the rivers. Waters that waited in darkness for centuries. Waters that fed things that should never come to the surface. Grantham frowned. Those are old tales. Superstitions. Then tell me what you think is inside that well, Isaac replied sharply. Grantham had no answer. Behind them another tremor rippled under the ground. A long low sound drifted upward from the well. It was not a hum this time. It was deeper, almost a voice. A tone that seemed to come from miles away yet close enough to vibrate inside the bones. Isaac stepped backward. Rachel appeared beside him with Thomas in her arms. The boy opened his eyes. His voice came out thin and distant. It is rising faster now. It wants to breathe. It wants to see the sky. Once it reaches the air, everything changes. Everything dies. Grantham stared at him. How do you know this? Thomas looked at the well. It told me. Grantham felt cold sweat drip down his neck. Something inside the boy's words felt true. Terribly true. The third tremor came at dawn. It shook the cabin doors. It rattled windows. It made the horses scream in the stables. Chickens fluttered wildly. The ground near the well cracked slightly, thin lines spreading outward from the edge like veins on a dying leaf. When the red sun rose over the horizon, the glow from the well grew stronger. The air around it shimmered faintly as if heated from below. The workers refused to come out of their cabins. The overseer attempted to force them, shouting orders and threats, but not a single man stepped forward. He tried to whip 2 of them, but even he stopped when the 4th tremor rolled under his feet like a wave. Around mid-morning, Grantham gathered his family and the enslaved elders in front of the main house. The fear in the air was thick enough to taste. Even the overseer looked shaken. "We cannot stay here," Grantham said. "We must leave Belmere." A murmur rose from the crowd. "Leave their homes. Leave the land. Leave everything behind." Isaac stepped forward. "It will not matter. If this thing reaches the surface, it will not stay on this land. It will spread. It will follow water. It will follow shadow. It will keep moving." One of the field hands whispered, "Then what can we do?" Rachel held tight to Thomas. He stared toward the well with tired eyes, as if watching something rise inch by inch beneath the earth. "There must be a way," Grantham insisted. "Everything has a weakness." Isaac shook his head. "Not everything." Another tremor rolled through the ground. Stronger this time, strong enough that the people stumbled. The stones near the well popped upward as if something below had pressed against them. The hum returned, louder, longer, like a call. Everyone fell silent. Something was coming, and now the earth itself warned them. The 5th tremor arrived moments later, the strongest of all. The plantation ground seemed to jump beneath their feet. Dust rose in clouds. A sharp crack split across the yard, forming a jagged line from the cabins all the way toward the sealed well. Something pushed from below. The glow brightened. The air tightened. The hum grew into a deep moan. And the people of Belmere knew the truth. The thing beneath the well was no longer waking. It was climbing. It was almost here. Part 6, modified in an interesting way, no dashes. Hook. Have you ever felt a moment when the air around you suddenly changes as if something ancient has stepped into the room and is breathing right beside you? That is exactly what happened the moment the candlelight flickered in the old Harrowfield manor and the truth began to reveal itself. Part 6. The night inside Harrowfield Manor had a strange heaviness that clung to the walls like a forgotten secret. The storm outside made the windows shake again and again. But the real danger was not the thunder. It was inside the house, walking silently, watching every move. Evelyn stood in the long hallway with the journal tightly held against her chest. She had already read enough to know that the story of this manor went much deeper than a family curse. The journal belonged to Margaret Harrowfield, a woman whose fate was sealed more than a century ago. Every word written in that fragile book felt like it still carried the weight of fear. Lucas walked beside her with a flashlight. His breath was unsteady and his hands were slightly shaking. He was trying to stay calm, but fear was spreading inside him like cold water. The hallway felt endless, stretching far into the darkness. The floor creaked under their feet as if the house was whispering something they could not understand. Evelyn stopped near an old portrait hanging crooked on the wall. It showed a woman with deep eyes and a gentle smile. The name carved underneath was Margaret Harrowfield. Evelyn felt a strange pull as if the woman in the painting was staring right into her soul. Lucas looked at it too. Something about the painting felt alive. The colors were old and faded, yet the eyes looked almost real. For a moment he thought the woman blinked. He stepped back quickly and the beam of his flashlight trembled. "Did you see that?" Evelyn asked. Her voice was low. "I think I did," he replied, even though he wished he had not. Evelyn opened the journal again. The last entry was smudged as if written with shaking hands. It read, "I know he is here. I hear him in the walls. The manor wants him and it wants me too. I pray the night does not end like this." A cold wave passed over them. Lucas noticed his breath turning white in the air even though the house should have been warm. Suddenly a sound echoed from the far end of the hallway. Slow, careful, like footsteps. They both froze. The sound grew louder. Then it stopped. Then it began again, but this time closer. Lucas whispered, "Evelyn, we need to move." But Evelyn shook her head. Something about those footsteps felt familiar. It reminded her of the dream she had earlier that night. A dream of a figure roaming the manor searching for her. She lifted the journal close to her face. On the next page were drawings. The drawings showed dark tunnels under the manor. Rooms that were not on any map. And, A figure with a long shadow standing near them. Lucas took the book from her hands and studied the drawings. These tunnels might still be here, he said. Maybe that is where the spirit or whatever this thing is hides. They walked further down the hallway and reached a wooden door. It was half open. Cold air rushed out from the darkness behind it. Lucas leaned forward. There were stairs leading down. The air smelled like earth and old stone. Evelyn felt her heart pounding. Every instinct told her not to go down there. But the truth was somewhere below, and the only way to stop this haunting was to face it. They climbed down carefully. Each step groaned under their feet. The flashlight flickered as if something was draining its power. When they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a long stone corridor. The walls were covered with strange carvings. The same symbols that Margaret had drawn in her journal. The deeper they walked, the colder it became. Lucas kept feeling like someone was behind them, but every time he turned around there was nothing but shadows. Then they heard a voice. Soft, almost like a whisper. It sounded like a woman calling for help. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. Margaret, she breathed. The voice echoed again. Painful, desperate, as if someone trapped between worlds was reaching out. They followed the sound to a small room made of stone. In the center stood an old wooden chair with ropes still tied to its sides. The air around it felt heavy, like the walls were holding on to memories of suffering. Evelyn touched the ropes gently. They were frayed but still strong. This is where it happened, she said. The final night Margaret wrote about. They held her here. They tried to silence her. Lucas swallowed hard. Why would they do that? Evelyn opened the journal to the last page. It read, "They fear what I know. The man with the shadow. The one who feeds on fear. He controls the house. And now the house is alive with him." Before Evelyn could speak, the room shook. The lantern on the wall flickered violently. A cold wind rushed through the chamber, and the shadows on the walls stretched upward like long fingers reaching for them. A shape appeared in the corner. Tall, dark, its form shifted like smoke. Its eyes glowed faintly as if burning from within. The figure moved silently toward them. Lucas stepped in front of Evelyn. His voice cracked, "Stay behind me." The figure stopped. Then it tilted its head slowly as if studying them. The air became so cold that Evelyn felt her fingers numb. A voice whispered inside their minds. "You brought the book back. You brought her story back." Evelyn gripped the journal. The spirit was not talking about Margaret alone. It was talking about the truth. The truth that the manor never wanted revealed. The figure moved closer. The shadows stretched to the floor around them. Evelyn felt something pressing against her chest. A force trying to push her backward. She opened the journal to the first page. A phrase she had not noticed before appeared under the candlelight. It read, "The one who knows the truth can weaken him." Evelyn read the words aloud. The moment she did, the air shifted. The figure shook violently as if the words burned it. The shadows pulled back. Lucas felt strength return to his body. "Evelyn, keep reading," he said. She continued reading Margaret's words one after another. With every sentence the figure faded. The darkness that surrounded them shrank back into the walls. The air began to warm. When Evelyn reached the final line, the figure let out a sound that echoed through the stone chambers. Then it dissolved into thin air and vanished. Silence filled the room. Lucas sighed deeply. "Is it over?" he asked. Evelyn looked at the journal. The pages shimmered softly, but when she touched them the book went cold again. "No," she said quietly. "This is not the end. This was only the beginning of what Margaret tried to warn us about." And the manor above them seemed to breathe again, as if waking up. The real nightmare had only begun. Part 7, modified in an interesting way, no dashes. Hook. There are moments when the darkness stops being just a shadow and becomes something aware. Something that watches you. Something that follows you even when you think you are alone. That was the feeling Evelyn and Lucas carried with them as they climbed back toward the manor, leaving behind the stone chamber that nearly stole their lives. Part 7. The stairs back to the main floor of Harrowfield Manor creaked with every step. The air grew warmer as they moved upward, but it was a false comfort. Evelyn could feel the house trembling softly. It felt like the walls were breathing, as if the manor was aware of what they had done in the tunnels below. Lucas wiped his forehead. Sweat mixed with dust streaked his face. He kept glancing behind him even though he knew the spirit had vanished in the chamber. But something else bothered him. The shadows on the wall were not matching their movements. They stretched in odd directions as if trying to reach for them. When they reached the hallway, the storm outside had grown violent. The windows rattled harder than before. Lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the long corridor for a moment. In that split second Evelyn saw a figure standing at the far end. It vanished in the next blink. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Lucas nodded without speaking. He tightened his grip on the flashlight even though it barely worked now. Evelyn opened Margaret's journal again. The pages had changed. New words appeared in handwriting that was not there earlier. The ink looked fresh, almost wet. It read, "Do not trust the silence. He walks when it is quiet." Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. The house had silence in every corner now. They walked toward the living room, the one place that felt open enough to breathe. But the moment they stepped inside, the door behind them slammed shut. The sound echoed through the entire house. Lucas ran to the door and pulled the handle. It did not move. Evelyn stepped backward slowly. The huge fireplace at the center of the room began to glow even though no one had lit it. Flames rose from the wood as if someone invisible had struck a match. The fire filled the room with warm light, but the warmth did not comfort them. It felt unnatural. The flames danced in chaotic shapes like twisted figures reaching toward the ceiling. Lucas stepped away from the door. "Evelyn, something is happening again." She nodded. Her fingers trembled as she held the journal. The words on the pages began to shift and rearrange themselves. The book was telling her something. Warning her. Then the flames in the fireplace twisted into a shape. A face formed, old and twisted with hollow eyes. The fire crackled louder as the face whispered a single word. "Leave." Evelyn felt the floor under her feet vibrate. Lucas grabbed her arm. They needed to get out. But the fireplace exploded outward with a burst of flame that shot across the room. They ducked. The fire burned the carpet and climbed the walls. The house was not just alive. It was angry. Lucas shouted, "We need to find another way out." They rushed toward a side door that led to the library. Evelyn grabbed the handle and pushed with all her strength. The door opened. They ran inside. The library was dim. The smell of old books filled the air. Shelves towered above them like ancient guardians. But something was wrong. The rows of books seemed endless now, stretching deeper than they should. The room had grown larger. Or maybe the house was changing its shape. Lucas looked around. "I do not remember it being this big." Before Evelyn could respond, the library door slammed shut behind them. She spun around but the door was gone. Only a wall of books remained. The house had trapped them again. She whispered, "Lucas, we are not in the same room anymore. The house is shifting." They moved forward slowly. The sound of pages rustling filled the air even though no one touched anything. Evelyn looked up. Books were sliding out of the shelves and falling open on the floor around them. Lucas picked one up. The pages were blank. Evelyn picked up another. Also blank. Then a single book fell from the highest shelf and landed at their feet. Its cover was black with a symbol burned into the leather. The same symbol Margaret had drawn in her journal. A circle with 3 lines crossing through it. Evelyn reached for the book. The moment her fingers touched it, she felt a shock run up her arm. She opened it, and inside were drawings of the manor. Detailed drawings of every room. But then the pictures changed. The drawings showed the house shifting, bending its hallways, moving its rooms like living muscles. Lucas stepped closer. "This house is alive. It is actually alive." Evelyn flipped through the pages. There were drawings of people too. People who seemed trapped in the walls. Their faces were stretched, their hands reaching outward as if begging to be freed. She shut the book quickly. Her heart thumped faster. "We need to find a way out before it traps us too." A low rumbling sound filled the library. The shelves shook violently. Books began to fall like rain. Evelyn covered her head while Lucas shielded her. The floor beneath them shifted. A massive crack opened, splitting across the room. It widened and widened until they had to jump back to avoid falling in. The crack glowed with a red light like fire deep below. Lucas yelled, "We have to move now." They ran toward the far end of the library where a tall stained glass window stood. Unlike the other windows, this one showed a scene of Margaret Harrowfield standing in the manor, holding the same symbol that was on the black book. Evelyn stared at it. There was something hidden behind the glass. A faint light. A different room. Lucas looked at her. We can break it. He grabbed a fallen piece of broken shelf and swung it at the window. The glass shattered. Behind it was not the outside world, but a small hidden passage. Without thinking twice they climbed inside. The passage was narrow. The air inside was thick. A candle burned at the end of the tunnel even though no one was there to light it. The candle flame flickered as if reacting to their presence. Evelyn held the journal tight. The pages glowed faintly again. She opened it and a new message had appeared in Margaret's old handwriting. The heart of the house is awake. If you reach it, you can end him. Lucas blew out a shaky breath. The heart of the house. What does that even mean? Evelyn looked down the passage. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. It means we keep moving, she said. Whatever the house is hiding is down there. And as they stepped deeper into the passage, the candle behind them went out. The darkness swallowed everything. The heart of Harrowfield Manor was waiting. Part 8. Modified in an interesting way, no dashes. Hook. Sometimes the path forward does not feel like a path at all. It feels like a throat. A living throat that pulls you deeper into a place you should never enter. That is exactly what Evelyn and Lucas felt as they stepped into the hidden passage under Harrowfield. They were not inside a tunnel. They were inside the house itself. And the house was breathing. Part 8. The narrow passage, twisted like a serpent beneath the manor. The walls were not smooth like carved stone. They were rough and warm to the touch, almost like hardened skin. Evelyn kept her fingers away from the walls as much as she could. She felt that if she touched them too long, something might grip her back. Lucas walked behind her, his steps slow and cautious. The only light came from Evelyn's flickering flashlight. It cast a small circle in front of them, and beyond that circle was nothing but thick darkness that seemed to move. Evelyn whispered, "Lucas, do you hear that?" He paused and listened. A faint sound echoed from somewhere far ahead. A slow rhythmic thump. It sounded like a heartbeat. He swallowed hard. "Yeah, I hear it." The passage began to slope downward. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, as if they were descending into the lungs of something old and dying. The heartbeat grew louder. The pulse echoed through the tunnel like waves pushing against their ears. Evelyn opened the journal Margaret had left behind. New ink had appeared again, forming words across a page that had been empty before. "Do not let the house speak to you. If you listen too long you will not return." Evelyn shut the journal quickly. The warning came too late. She already felt whispering at the edges of her mind. Gentle voices. Curious voices. Voices that said her name. "Evelyn, Evelyn." Lucas touched her arm. "Hey, are you okay?" She nodded even though she was not. "We have to keep going." They continued deeper until the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. The room was circular with a ceiling lost in darkness. Black roots like twisted vines covered the walls, pulsing with a faint red glow. They looked almost like veins. At the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal. And resting on top of the pedestal was an object wrapped in decayed cloth. The heartbeat grew louder in this room. It vibrated through the ground and traveled up their legs. Lucas stepped closer to the pedestal. Evelyn stayed back. Something inside her screamed not to touch the wrapped object. Lucas whispered, "What is this place?" Evelyn scanned the chamber. "This is the heart." Margaret said it in her journal. "The heart of the house. Whatever is controlling Harrowfield is connected to this room." Lucas reached toward the cloth. Evelyn grabbed his arm. "No, do not touch that." But it was too late. The heartbeat stopped for a moment. Complete silence filled the chamber. Then the room shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. The roots pulsed brighter. A voice whispered through the chamber. Not with sound but directly into their minds. "He should not be here." Evelyn turned in a circle, searching the shadows. Lucas stepped back. "Evelyn, what is happening?" The chamber floor cracked. Black liquid oozed out like thick tar. The roots began to move, curling and uncoiling like living tendrils. One root slithered across the floor toward them. Lucas pulled Evelyn behind him. The tendril snapped like a whip where they had just stood. "We need to get out of this room," Evelyn shouted. But the entrance they came through was no longer there. Only a solid wall remained. The house had sealed them inside the heart. Lucas ran to the wall and slammed his shoulder against it. It did not move. Another root whipped across the chamber. He ducked narrowly. Evelyn opened the journal again. The pages flipped on their own. Words appeared in rushing ink. The heart must see the truth. Only then will he release you. Evelyn looked at the pedestal. The object wrapped in cloth. She stepped toward it slowly. Lucas grabbed her arm. Evelyn, no. You do not know what that thing is. I do not, Lucas. But Margaret does. And she wrote this for us. Evelyn reached the pedestal. The heartbeat thundered around her, almost painful now. Her hands trembled as she touched the cloth. She pulled it away. Underneath was a stone mask. Gray, cracked, ancient. The eyes were hollow. The mouth was twisted into a silent scream. Lucas stared at it. What is that? Evelyn did not know. But the moment she lifted it, the chamber screamed. A sound like metal grinding against metal filled the air. The roots writhed violently as if in agony. The voice returned. This time it spoke with fury. You do not belong here. The chamber walls split open. A massive shape began pushing through the cracks. Something with claws. Something with too many limbs. Something older than the house itself. Lucas shouted, Evelyn, run. They sprinted across the chamber. The monster crawled from the wall, its limbs scraping stone. Its body made of shadow and bone. Its eyes bright with hatred. The creature lunged at them. Lucas shoved Evelyn aside and the creature's claw scraped across his shoulder. He cried out but kept running. The mask in Evelyn's hands began to glow. The stone warmed until she almost dropped it. The glow spread into her fingers, then into her arms. Her entire body felt lighter as if something ancient was filling her with strength. The roots froze mid-movement. The creature halted, its eyes fixed on the mask. Evelyn raised it higher. She did not know what she was doing. But she felt the mask pulling energy from the chamber. Drawing light from the roots. Stealing power from the creature. A wind rose from nowhere. Dust and debris swirled around her. The heartbeat began to slow. The room vibrated like something breaking apart. Light exploded from the mask. A bright white flash swallowed the chamber. Evelyn felt her body lift off the ground. She felt weightless. Lucas shouted her name but she could not hear anything through the roaring white light. Then everything went silent. The heartbeat stopped completely. The chamber vanished. Evelyn collapsed onto cold stone. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. The mask lay beside her. Its glow was gone. Lucas crawled toward her, panting. Evelyn, are you hurt? No, she whispered. But something is wrong. They both looked up. They were no longer in the heart chamber. They were in a completely different room. A room filled with old portraits of the Harrowfield family. Portraits that now stared at them with eyes that looked disturbingly alive. Lucas whispered, this house is not letting us go. Not yet. Evelyn slowly stood, holding the journal and the mask. She looked at the portraits. One portrait in particular. Margaret Harrowfield. Her painted expression had changed. The eyes were now narrowed. Focused. Watching. Evelyn whispered, Lucas. What? Margaret is not trying to help us anymore. The portrait blinked. The house groaned. And the real nightmare began. Part 9, modified in an interesting way, no dashes. Hook. Some houses try to keep you inside their walls. Harrowfield does something worse. It rewrites its own history while you are standing inside it. It bends time like soft clay and forces you to walk through moments that were never meant for living eyes. And as Evelyn and Lucas learned in the 9th chapter of this nightmare, the past inside Harrowfield is not dead at all. It is hungry. Part 9. Evelyn stood frozen in front of the portrait of Margaret Harrowfield. It was no longer the still image she remembered. The painted eyes moved with slow, deliberate motion, following her as she shifted her weight. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with memory and something darker. Lucas whispered, do not move. I am not moving, Evelyn whispered back. The entire gallery seemed to breathe around them. The floorboards expanded and contracted beneath their feet like ribs lifting with each inhale. The portraits that lined the walls stared down at them. Some looked mournful, some looked furious, some looked hollow, like the souls behind the paint had already been drained. Evelyn clutched the stone mask. Its weight felt different now, lighter as if some of its power had been burned away in the heart chamber. The journal in her other hand trembled slightly as if reacting to the air around them. Lucas pointed to the far end of the room. Look, at the end of the gallery stood a tall arched doorway. But there had been no doorway when they first entered. The house was changing again. We need to go, Evelyn said quietly. She took a step toward the arch. The portraits reacted instantly. The faces twisted with anger. The air pulsed with a low rumbling sound, like distant thunder rolling across the sky. Lucas grabbed her hand. Run! They sprinted toward the new doorway as the room erupted around them. Frames cracked. Paint peeled away from canvas like skin from bone. A loud ripping sound tore through the gallery as the portraits reached for them, stretching out long fingers of paint that curled through the air. Evelyn and Lucas leapt through the arch just as a painted hand scraped across the wall where Evelyn's head had been. The doorway slammed shut behind them. Evelyn caught her breath and looked around. They were standing in a long corridor lined with doors. The air was cold enough to sting their skin. A faint fog drifted along the floor like it had seeped up from a frozen cellar. Lucas touched one of the doorknobs. It shocked him with a jolt of cold that made him jerk his hand back. Evelyn opened the journal. More ink appeared without warning, forming slow deliberate words. Choose a door, but choose carefully. One shows the truth, the others show the end. Lucas exhaled shakily. Great, so one door saves us and the rest kill us. Evelyn ran her hand across the mask. Something inside her whispered that the mask could help. She lifted it and pointed it at the doors. For a moment nothing happened. The corridor was still and quiet. Then the mask warmed. A faint shimmer appeared around the third door on the left. Lucas pointed. That one. It has to be that one. Evelyn grabbed the handle and pushed the door open. Inside was a staircase leading downward. The steps were narrow and made of old stone. A dim orange glow flickered far below like candlelight. Evelyn looked at Lucas. Stay close. They walked down the stairs. The candles continued to flicker below. The air grew warmer with each step. By the time they reached the bottom, sweat clung to their skin. Before them stretched a massive underground chamber. At its center stood a wooden table covered in documents, maps, and strange symbols carved into old parchment. But the room was not abandoned. A man stood behind the table, writing slowly with an ink quill. He wore an old suit covered in dust. His hair was silver, his posture straight and stiff like someone who had never truly slept. Evelyn whispered, "Who is that?" Lucas stepped forward. "Sir." The man lifted his head. The moment his eyes met theirs, both Evelyn and Lucas froze. The man looked exactly like the portraits upstairs. It was Richard Harrowfield, the last living master of the house. The man who was said to have vanished in 1893 without a trace. But here he was, alive, breathing, writing. Richard spoke without emotion. "You should not have come here." Evelyn's voice trembled. "We did not choose to. The house brought us." Richard walked around the table slowly. His footsteps echoed like hollow drums. "This house does not bring the living. It only keeps the ones it has already claimed." Lucas stepped back. "We are not claimed by anything. We came for answers." Richard looked at him with cold amusement. "Answers will not save you. Answers never save anyone." Evelyn raised the mask. "What is this?" Richard flinched as if the sight of it caused him pain. "Put that down. Now." "Not until you tell us what it is," Evelyn said. Richard stared at the mask for a long moment. Then he spoke in a low voice. "It is a seal, a lock, a piece of a much older prison. The mask binds the heart of the house. Without it, the house would consume everything it touches." Evelyn frowned. "Then why is the house still alive?" "Because the mask is cracked," Richard said. "The seal is broken. The house is waking. And it is hungry." Lucas looked around the chamber. "Why did you come down here, Richard? Why are you still alive?" Richard paused. His expression darkened. "I am not alive." The torches flickered violently. Shadows crawled across the walls. "I have been trapped here for 130 years," Richard continued. "The house uses me. It forces me to remember every sin committed within these walls. Every scream, every cruelty, every death. It feeds on memory and on guilt. It will feed on yours too." Evelyn stepped back. "There must be a way out. Margaret tried to guide us." Richard froze. "Margaret?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "She has been helping us." Richard shook his head. "No, Margaret died in this house. Her soul is chained to its heart. She cannot guide you. She cannot leave. She cannot speak freely. The house speaks through her." The journal trembled in Evelyn's hand. Lucas pointed at the chamber walls. Then why did she lead us to you? Richard's eyes went wide with fear. She did not. The house did. A deep rumbling shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ground cracked beneath their feet. Richard shouted, "Run! Get out of here! Now!" The chamber walls began to fold like living flesh closing around a wound. Evelyn grabbed Lucas's hand. They sprinted up the stairs as the room collapsed behind them. The walls groaned. The ceiling split open. Something monstrous clawed at the stone. Richard Harrowfield screamed from below. A scream filled with centuries of torment. Evelyn and Lucas reached the top of the stairs. The door slammed behind them. The corridor shook violently. Lucas gasped, "Evelyn, what do we do?" Evelyn looked at the journal. At the mask. At the trembling floor. She whispered, "The house is awake. And it knows we are here. If you want part 10, final part, just say please send part 10. Part 10. Modified final part, no dashes. Hook. Every house has its secrets. Harrowfield does not keep secrets. It consumes them, twists them, and throws them back at anyone foolish enough to enter." Evelyn and Lucas were about to find out what happens when a house finally wakes completely. This is the last chapter, the truth that the walls have been hiding for centuries, and it is more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Part 10. The corridor shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling as Evelyn clutched the mask tightly. Lucas stumbled beside her, eyes wide with fear. Every painting, every door, every shadow seemed to ripple like it was alive. The house had finally awakened, and they were in the middle of its heartbeat. Evelyn whispered, "Lucas, we have to get out. Now." Lucas nodded, but the fear in his voice was clear. The doors were gone. The walls were moving. The portraits were no longer just watching. They were leaning, stretching, reaching toward them. The journal trembled in Evelyn's hands. Words appeared as if written by invisible fingers. "Run. Do not look back. The heart is open." She swallowed hard and looked at the mask. It was the only thing that had protected them so far. She raised it instinctively. The mask glowed faintly in her hands. The glow pulsed with the rhythm of the house, like it was alive too. Suddenly the floor beneath them cracked. A deep chasm opened, spilling black smoke and shadows that hissed and whispered in 1,000 voices at once. The voices were not in English. They were old, older than any language Evelyn had ever heard. Some words felt like nails scraping inside her skull. Lucas grabbed her hand. "Evelyn, we fall together." They jumped into the chasm. The air roared past them. The walls of the house seemed to fold in on themselves. Shadows reached for them, grasping, clawing. Evelyn clutched the mask tightly. The glow intensified. When they hit the bottom, they were no longer in the house. The world around them was a vast darkness. The smell of iron and decay filled the air. A deep hum resonated through the ground, vibrating in their bones. Evelyn whispered, "What is this place?" Lucas's voice trembled. "I think this is the heart." The place the mask was sealing. A figure emerged from the shadows. Towering, twisted, its form shifting constantly. Its eyes glowed with an ancient hunger. The heartbeat of the house came from it. Evelyn realized then that the house itself was alive. The walls, the floors, the portraits, the very air, they were all extensions of this monstrous consciousness. The figure spoke. Its voice was layered, echoing, and terrifying. "You have broken the seal. You have let me rise." Evelyn raised the mask higher. The glow expanded, illuminating the monstrous figure. Its many faces hissed and screamed. The shadows writhed around it, but the light from the mask cut through them like fire. Lucas shouted, "Evelyn, what do we do?" Evelyn focused on the words she had read in the journal. "The mask binds the heart of the house. That means it is the key. It is both the lock and the seal. We have to put it back." The figure lunged at them. Evelyn held the mask forward, and the light pushed the creature back, but it was relentless. Every pulse of the heartbeat made it stronger. Lucas grabbed her waist and helped her run toward a distant glow in the darkness. The journal trembled again. "Put it on the pedestal. Return it. Now." Evelyn and Lucas ran. The shadows twisted into long limbs trying to grab them. Every step was a fight against the pull of the house. But the glow ahead promised hope. At the center of the vast darkness was a stone pedestal. The same one they had seen long ago, in their dreams and memories of the heart chamber. Evelyn lifted the mask over the pedestal. The glow grew intense, brighter than sunlight. The monstrous figure screamed in pain and rage. It convulsed, its form dissolving into smoke and shadow, clawing at the pedestal as if it could reach inside and destroy the mask. Evelyn placed the mask carefully on the pedestal. The moment it touched the stone, the house shuddered violently. The ground quaked. The shadows screeched and pulled back as if something had bitten them. A sudden silence fell. The heartbeat stopped. The oppressive weight of the house lifted. Evelyn and Lucas fell to their knees, gasping for air. The darkness around them began to fade. Shapes of the house emerged, not threatening now, but crumbling, breaking apart, as if relieved to be released. The portraits no longer moved. The corridors froze. The fog cleared. The smell of iron and decay dissipated. Evelyn looked at Lucas. "Is it over?" Lucas nodded, though his hands shook. "I think so. For now." The mosque's glow dimmed completely. Evelyn knew it still held power, but it was silent. The house was subdued. The heart had been sealed again. Suddenly, the world shifted. They were no longer in the darkness. They were back in the Harrowfield Manor, standing in the old gallery. Sunlight streamed through broken windows. Dust motes floated in the air. The portraits were lifeless, their eyes no longer moving. The house was quiet. Evelyn whispered, "Lucas, we did it. We actually did it." Lucas pulled her into a shaky hug. For the first time in hours, maybe days, they allowed themselves to breathe. Evelyn set the mask on a wooden table. It was silent, dormant, but she knew it would always be dangerous. She knew the house would always remember. The house would always wait. But for now, they were alive. As they stepped toward the exit, Evelyn glanced at the journal. The words had vanished. Only blank pages remained. Margaret Harrowfield had finally stopped writing. The house was quiet. The story was over. Or at least this chapter was. They reached the front doors. The sunlight was warm on their faces. Outside, the world was real and tangible, not twisted and alive like Harrowfield. Birds sang. The wind moved through the trees. Everything seemed normal, impossibly normal. Lucas looked at Evelyn. "We leave it like this, right?" Evelyn nodded. "Some things are better left sealed. The house is still dangerous. The mask still holds power. But now we know the truth. And knowing is enough to survive." They walked away from Harrowfield, its shadow shrinking behind them. The house would wait, as houses always do, for the next foolish souls. Evelyn whispered one last time to herself, "Thank you, Margaret." The sun rose higher, spilling light over the manor grounds. Harrowfield remained, silent, dormant, but alive. The horrors inside were not gone, just hidden. And the story, now complete, would survive only in memory. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button for more chilling stories. Leave a comment down below telling us if you would dare to enter Harrowfield. Share this video with friends who love horror and history. And remember, some houses remember everything.